Hi, my name is Brandy Frisbee, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our research that we have titled Love Me, Love My Class, International Instructor Perceptions of Rapport Building with Students. My co-author, Blanca Muniz, is a graduate student at the University of Kentucky where I work. So part of this research just stems from my long history in instructional communication and understanding some of the critiques that we are up against and ways that we as a discipline can address those critiques. So in general, the critiques have focused on a need to understand more about the instructor-student relationship and that relational perspective of what happens in the classroom and how that influences students. There's also been a call for more research to focus on internationalization of education and how culture influences our instructional practices and outcomes. And especially from the instructor perspective, so much of our research is from the student perspective that we don't always get that other side. And so with that as a starting place and my interest in that relational side of the instructor-student relationship, I turned to the research on rapport. Rapport is defined as a mutual, trusting, dyadic connection where the student and the teacher enjoy interacting and have really positive outcomes from that. So students who have rapport with their instructors are more engaged, they're more likely to attend, they tend to perform better, they have better attendance, and at a higher level, they're more likely to persist and even to graduate. Rapport research in my world and what I started doing began about 10 years ago with my colleagues, and since then continued with my colleagues and my graduate students. And it is no stranger to critiques either. Some of the critiques of rapport research influence what should be happening and influenced the decisions that we made in this study. So specifically, needing to know more again about that instructor point of view, understanding why instructors build rapport. We know the outcomes for students, but why do instructors choose to do this when we already have so many behaviors we should engage in the classroom? And then the critique that the majority of this research has happened in the United States, my own research included up until this point. So the current study asked these questions. We took a qualitative approach to finding as many instructors as we could who were teaching abroad, teaching internationally, to understand more about the role of rapport in those international classrooms. So we asked about the importance, we asked why it was important, if it was important, what strategies instructors use, because we know that teaching styles can vary greatly across disciplines and across cultures. And then ask the instructors a little bit about what they perceived their own competency in rapport building to be. So we recruited 35 different participants using email, social media, network sampling. This was an online survey, all open-ended with a few single item descriptive type measures. We tried to be very inclusive of the cultures that we represented, but also the disciplines that we represented. So you can see here on the screen all of the different countries that we had represented. If you are a believer in Hofstede's dimensions, you'll see that many of these countries vary on all of those power distance and masculinity and those dimensions that we typically see used to differentiate the countries. And then you'll see that we had very diverse disciplines represented as well, everything from the hard sciences to the humanities. So we wanted to be able to account for or include those different approaches and philosophical approaches to education as well. So in response to research question 1, participants rated rapport as very important. The mean score was 9.11, so almost perfect. Everyone agreed it was important regardless of those disciplinary or cultural differences. And we prodded that question a little more by asking why it was important. And the instructors who participated, all of their responses were able to be categorized into 6 different themes. And so we'll share a quote from each of those with you. The first theme really focused on just getting a positive affective response to the students. And affect could have been related to interest or motivation. And so the instructors wanted their students to have that affective piece in the classroom, even if it didn't always lead to learning. They wanted to improve the classroom dynamics, and so this was perhaps a way to make students feel valued, confirmed, safe, and able to participate without feeling threatened or anxious, and just making sure that they trusted the instructor. The third theme was effective teaching behavior for learning. And so these are the quotes and these are the rationales for building rapport that really focused on, I do this because my students learn better when I do this. And one of the examples here just talked about, when I know my students, I've built rapport with them. I know how to better tailor my lessons and my examples and make things relevant to them so that they learn the content better. The fourth theme was focused on the relational side. It's important to build a relationship with the students that leads to trust. Some of the instructors talked about how when they had that relationship, they were able to connect students to better resources because of that relationship. Improving student outcomes was our fifth theme. And again, this was focused on what the product was of that process. And finally, there were some instructors who recognized benefits for themselves. They believed that teaching helped them to get better evaluations, perhaps, helped them to build credibility. In some cases, it helped them to even get away with doing things in the classroom that students might not otherwise find acceptable. Research question 2 asked about the strategies that instructors employed to build rapport with students. Many of our current rapport measures focus on the perception that rapport exists and don't always focus on the ways that we get to that perception. And so for every single response from those instructors, we pulled out every single strategy that they listed. Many of them did list multiple strategies. There were 137 total. We reviewed that full list for anything that was duplicated or had significant conceptual overlap. So a really simple one was if one instructor said learned names and another instructor said used names, we removed those as duplicated ideas to kind of simplify this list a little bit. We ended up with 67 different individual strategies that multicultural instructors use to build rapport with their students. And these strategies were able to be organized into 12 overarching themes. Now, the majority of these themes exist in current rapport research, things like using names or having self-disclosure with your students. There were a few that did not emerge in previous typologies and previous measures that were used. So for example, seeking feedback was a strategy that had not emerged previously. In this case, they talked about getting students feedback on how the course was going, how their teaching style was, and then actually implementing that in the classroom. Another example was the idea of celebrations. So when a student did well on a test or got a new job, if the instructors celebrated that individual, they saw that as one of the strategies that they intentionally used to build rapport. Research question 3 asked about whether instructors thought they were effective at building rapport. And in general, you can see with our little gauge there that the majority of instructors found themselves to be very effective and very confident in their abilities to build rapport. Related to their abilities and their confidence in rapport, though, they did identify barriers and facilitators to their ability to build rapport. So for example, one barrier, I'm finding that I have less in common with my students as I get older. In some cases, they talked about class size, they talked about student apathy. These were barriers that the instructors perceived to being able to do that. On the other hand, facilitators were things that helped them to build rapport. And sometimes this referred to things that are related to the next theme in terms of it coming naturally. Perhaps it was a personality trait or just a piece of their character or their teaching style that helped them to be effective at that. So there was kind of a tension between it comes naturally to some people, I have to work really hard at it. But the majority also said, even though it might come naturally to some, it is a skill that I've been able to develop over time and to refine and improve on. And so a main theme that came out of this is that rapport is a trainable skill. This is something that we can use to help instructors or graduate students and new teachers to improve their overall classroom environment for all of those motives that we talked about before, to improve learning and relationships and dynamics. And in fact, the majority of our instructors, almost 75%, said that even if they were confident or effective in their rapport building skills, they actually desired more training in that area. And so there's a real opportunity here to help instructors to improve in that area of teaching. So this is a smaller study, exploratory study. We don't claim that one representative from one country is generalizable to the teaching styles of that entire country or even that entire discipline. But we do make some preliminary conclusions here that need to be explored further. And so some really interesting areas for future research are here. One quote that I particularly liked and that seems to be supported by our data is that rapport might be a universally effective teaching behavior that potentially transcends country, culture, and discipline. None of our participants voiced any concern about rapport, voiced any negative experiences with rapport, or even really talked about the differences because of disciplines or cultures. They just saw that as a teaching competency that was necessary to the classroom, even if for different reasons. The training and professional development opportunities here, we know that in some disciplines, there's very little teacher training, in others there's a lot. In both of those situations, I don't know that there is always a significant focus on the rapport building side. And so there's an opportunity here to develop that and then to assess that. And then with our initial list, all large list of 67 strategies, there is some potential to explore that further for a multicultural rapport building scale for the classroom, one that's developed with more input from a variety of countries rather than one that is being applied from a Western or a US-based culture of scale development. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity here for instructional scholars and rapport scholars to continue to address those significant critiques of instructional research and of rapport research. And I hope that you find this helpful in beginning that journey. Thank you.